Thank you very much indeed, and thank you very much to LNet for inviting me to this extremely important conference. I've been in Israel for most of the time since the 9th of October 2023. Been in and out a bit, but I spent most of my time in Israel. And during that time, I've learned two extremely important things. The first one is that Israelis don't know how to use elevators. If you get in an elevator, 10 people, you go down to the ground floor, there are 10 people waiting outside, they want to get in before these guys get out. I thought it was a misunderstanding of basic physics, but I think actually it's a sign of weakness if you let someone out before you get in. And the second thing I've learnt, which is probably even more important, is how to be a good Shabbat Goy. For those of you who are not Jewish in the room and don't know what a Shabbat Goy is, it's basically somebody like me, a non-Jew, who operates an elevator, if you can get into it, on Shabbat, or lets someone into their hotel room using an electronic key, that sort of stuff. I've been during that time, I've visited Gaza on a number of occasions with the IDF. I've been to the other battlefronts as well. And I've witnessed for myself how complicated this war is. I think I would say this is the most complex and challenging war that's ever been fought. And I've been to Ukraine since the war began, visited the battlefronts there. It's a tough war. It's a very casualty-intensive war, but it's a much more simple and straightforward war with armies facing armies. In Gaza, in particular, you've got so many different complexities, ranging from very dense civilian population, tunnels underground, hostages, the fact that Hamas has had decades to prepare this battleground. All of these things and much more lead to immense complexities and challenges. And I know it's fashionable to say, and that's just one front, one of 7 different fronts. I know it's fashionable in some quarters, including among those who support Israel, to say, well, I support Israel, but I'm not really happy with the current government, Netanyahu and all that. I would like to pay tribute to that government. I think they've fought an extraordinary war. I'm not saying there haven't been missteps, because of course there are missteps in every war, particularly of this complexity. But I think they've done a remarkable job. And I'd like even more to pay tribute to the extraordinary soldiers fighting in the IDF. They come from around the world. Obviously, the majority of them from Israel. They come from France, Britain, the United States, probably all of our countries represented here, and have fought heroically and with immense skill and humanity on the battlefield. And on the subject of humanity, I'd just like to say one thing, which is, yes, it's been a terrible war. Yes, there have been a large number of civilian casualties in Gaza and in the other theaters that the IDF has been forced to fight in. Every casualty on every front, and particularly every casualty in Gaza, is the responsibility of Hamas. Every single casualty. The IDF have done all they can to minimize civilian deaths in Gaza, and you know the different methods that they use, far more advanced and more effective and complex than any of our other armies have used in a comparable type of conflict. Far, far more effective. And not only minimizing casualties, but also maximizing the entry of humanitarian aid into Gaza. Never in the history of warfare that I know of has any army taken such steps to get humanitarian aid to their enemy population while fighting on the same terrain. They've built new roads specifically in Gaza to distribute aid. They've opened crossing points for the same purposes. All of these things. And not only in Gaza, but also if you look at Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen, Israel's been forced to carry out strikes in all those countries. And those strikes have been preceded by warnings to the civilian population. Unprecedentedly, Israel has taken over the airwaves in those countries and warn people to leave specific areas. I don't think that's been done before, to my knowledge. So with all these measures, and many, many more I could go into, it's still the case that Israel is in the wrong. Israel is the aggressor. Israel is the murderer. It's the genocidist. How can that be the case? Well, it's down to one thing, the 8th battlefront. You know the other 7, the 7 active battlefronts. The 8th battlefront is not what many people in this room may think it is, which is, you might answer if I said, what is it? It's propaganda, it's media. It's not that. It's political warfare. And media and propaganda are part of that, but only one part of it. Maybe even the most important part, but only a part of it. The other parts include subversion in our own countries. They include what's called joint action, I think, in the Soviet world, which is, or united front action, which is to harness other interest groups to the cause of the anti-Israel interest groups. There is legal warfare, there is propaganda, there is psychological warfare. There's a full range of warfare activities that are taking place in our countries, funded, orchestrated, directed from Russia, from China, from Qatar, from, of course, Iran, by Hamas and other elements such as that, who essentially created this political warfare campaign. The political warfare campaign is so effective, it became effective on the 7th of October against Israel, when any other country would have incurred vast amount of sympathy and support if it was attacked in the way Israel was attacked. Not true for Israel. In some quarters, yes, of course, but in a wide range of areas, Israel came under fire on day one almost. That's because this political warfare campaign began in the 1960s. It began in the Soviet Union. It was a deliberate operation called Operation SIG, which was launched in order to turn what was a religious war by the Arabs against the Jews into a war of national liberation. They created in Moscow, they created the Palestinian national identity. In Moscow, they wrote the Palestinian National Charter. They sent thousands of agents into the Middle East to stir up this political war. And the reason they wanted it to be a war of national liberation, not a religious war, is so that the West would support it. The West was not that keen on religious wars. They were very keen on wars of national liberation. And it worked. And the slogans that you see on our streets, in London 2 days ago, for example, in university campuses, elsewhere, illegal occupation, illegal settlements, land theft, genocide, apartheid, all of these lies and slurs started off in the Soviet Union and have been incredibly effective and incredibly successful. And these kids are now chanting Soviet slogans in support of their anti-Israel cause. It has had major effect on our political leaders, a major effect. And I've spent quite a lot of time since the war began briefing political leaders in Europe, in the EU, in the US, in Britain, in Australia, and in South Africa, and other places on this war. And there are obviously a lot of supporters of Israel, but there are a lot of people who oppose it. And they are simply repeating, in so many cases, the lies that started off in Moscow in the mid-60s. They really don't know much better than that. And just one example of the way that this has taken hold. The British government, when the International Criminal Court brought its outrageous charges against Prime Minister Netanyahu and former Defence Minister Gallant, the British government, at the time a Conservative government, raised an objection to the International Criminal Court on the basis of jurisdiction. And the jurisdiction that the ICC have applied is itself an outrage. It's invalid. But nevertheless, it's been applied. The British government objected to it. The Labour government, when they came into power, immediately withdrew that objection. Since then, the International Criminal Court Appeals Court has again has questioned the jurisdiction of the ICC itself and has asked to review that again. So it shows, I think, that the Conservative government was right to raise the objection. The Labour government, bowing under the pressure of this political warfare campaign and the concerns about the noise on the streets against Israel, made the wrong decision in deciding to withdraw that challenge. I don't believe that necessarily, and I may be wrong here, I hope I'm not, others may have different views, I don't believe that political warfare campaign has seized as much power over our populations, certainly as might appear. I was in London the day before yesterday at an anti-Israel, what I would call a Jew-hate protest, which was called the Nakba Day protest. Tens of thousands of people marching through the streets of London making a lot of noise. And you would think this represents the majority. Then, and I hate to raise a triviality in a serious audience like this, but I'm not sure it is quite so trivial. But that same day, there was a thing called, and I don't know if anyone here has heard of it, I certainly never have watched it, there was a thing called the Eurovision Song Contest, which is not a song contest, it's basically a political contest. The songs don't really matter, with all due respect to the artists that performed them. But overwhelmingly, European countries, a public vote, not necessarily the elites in the juries, but the public vote was in support of Israel, overwhelmingly. For example, Britain, France, Germany, and other European countries gave the maximum number of votes to the Israeli candidate. Even Ireland, I don't know if there's any Irish in this room, the bastion of anti-Israel action gave almost the maximum number of votes in the public vote to Israel. Now, that's not a scientific poll, and many polls show a different picture, but I think it's something that we need to look at and maybe take some hope from and some guidance from, and also bear in mind the fact that something like 60% of the voters in the Eurovision Song Contest are between the ages of 15 and 35. So the exact opposite demographic as you think might support Israel. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very pleased to say, although it's very easy to get depressed about what's going on in Israel today, I'm extremely optimistic about Israel's future. I believe Israel's going to emerge from this war much stronger than it went into it, not least because I believe the Abraham Accords are going to take off. Saudi Arabia is going to normalize relations with Israel, and we're going to see, I think, basically a sea change in the Arab world, even beyond what we've seen so far. And I also believe that all of us in this room can be, I think, proud of the fact that we are standing on the right side of history. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.